Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the posting of the colors for the joint Illinois University ROTC.
Color guard, attention. Forward, march, left, 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 right. Left, 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 right. Left, 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 right. Left, 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 right. Color guard, halt, right, face, post. Colors, freeze at, arms, order, arms, right, face, forward, march, left, 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 right, 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 left, left, color guard, halt.
All right, please be seated. Welcome to the Ches Veteran Center. My name is Andy Bender. I'm the new director of the center. I've been here about 4 months, and I'm very honored to have you all here today. For me, today is not just an opportunity to celebrate our nation's veterans and the service that they've provided. I also want to be a reminder of the long history that the University of Illinois has and the traditions it has to support and serve our veterans and our veteran community. I really hope that today is the beginning of a different way we approach veterans and Veterans Day, and that we come together as a community, and not just once a year, not just twice a year, but all the time, because the work that we do at the center and our mission and the mission that we're asking you to be a part of is really important. And I think it speaks volumes to who's here today and why you're here. But I'm looking forward to a long, fruitful partnership that's really going to, change the way we support our veterans in the future. So again, thank you very much. I'm going to go right to it. Our guest speaker today, I think a lot of you know, she's well known around the university and in our military circles, our veteran circles. Colonel retired Deborah Olson Read was born and raised in Ironwood, Michigan, and attended high school in Oak Park, Illinois. She graduated with honors from the University of Illinois in 1973 with a Bachelor's of Arts in Liberal Arts and Sciences. She was also a member of Alpha Omicron Pi sorority and the 100 Club honorary. Really interesting. She was a direct commission into the Women's Army Corps. At the time of her commissioning, women weren't allowed at ROTC. And so she was, on her own volition, she trained with the Army ROTC here on campus, took those courses and trained, and then commissioned with the ROTC cadets as a lieutenant. During that time, beginning of her career, the Army was capped, the number of women it allowed to serve, and so women officers were few and far between, and so she was probably often in her career the only woman, and probably the highest ranking woman at that, when she worked. She's a qualified air defense artillery, military intelligence, and adjutant general corps. Many assignments throughout her 30-year career, but I think of note, the first woman officer in the 197th Infantry Brigade at Fort Benning, Georgia, which, for some of you who in the Army circles know that went on to become the training brigade there at Fort Benning. I was a proud graduate of a number of those courses. She was also the assistant professor of military science at the University of Detroit, University of Michigan, and Purdue, so she has a long history of leadership and development of our nation's officers. Among her many decorations and awards, she's a winner of the Legion of Merit, and she was inducted into the ROTC Fighting Illini Hall of Fame in 2014. So, Col Read, thank you for your time and being here today.
And thank you, Lieutenant Colonel Retired Bender, and welcome to Ches. We look to fill that job for a long time. I'm honored to be invited to speak to you today. I'd also like to recognize in the front row here Jill Henry, Lieutenant Colonel Retired. She's the Illinois Ambassador to the Military Women's Memorial. was originally set to honor the end of World War I in 1918, which ended on the 11th month of the 11th day at the 11th hour, thus the timing of today's event. I'm wearing a uniform today because Army regulations say that if the event recognizes the shared sacrifice of our veterans on Veterans Day, the service uniform is appropriate. Last time I checked, veterans were authorized to wear the uniform that was appropriate when they left the service or the current uniform. My husband still fits in his uniform. I ordered new ones. I'd like to begin by recognizing a group of 9 cadets, however many are here today, and actually, please come forward, don't just stand, come forward. 9 cadets who represented the University of Illinois, ROTC, on October 14th through 16th at the 25th anniversary of the Military Women's Memorial. U of I's own Brigadier General, retired, Wilma Vaught, was the founding president of the memorial. The cadets attended an all-services reunion where they were presented with certificates of appreciation by current Military Women's Memorial President Phyllis Wilson. And that's Phyllis right there in the middle. The anniversary program was held, and then we've got one other, had a lot of fun posing for that one. That was the night of the all-services reunion. See, we did have some fun. They worked hard, but we had a lot of fun. The anniversary program was at the memorial, and my husband and I were thrilled. Our granddaughter, Jordan Read, was excited to join the group. She just loved hanging out with the cadets. Interestingly enough, she had really hoped to be at the program today, but her mom came down with COVID, so Jordan didn't come, but she texted Jackie to let her know about that. Jordan hasn't texted me in several weeks, but she texted Jackie, so she really bonded with these cadets. We had an opportunity to meet General Vaught, the lady wearing blue in the middle, and you can't quite see it in this slide, but you see it in another one. She's wearing her Presidential Medal of Freedom that she was presented over the summer. The cadets also had an opportunity to hear the address by the Secretary of Defense, the Honorable Lloyd Austin III, who mentioned the U of I cadets in his speech and posed for a picture with them afterwards. One of the other speakers, and I don't have a picture of that one, but featured the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, the Honorable Dennis McDonough. That evening, the cadets led the candlelight honor walk from the Lincoln Memorial to the Women's Memorial. In the front row there, you can see Cadet Mackenzie Larson, Nick Chung, who's here with us today, and Jacqueline Pranata, who's also here with us today. Next row, we've got a picture of cadets Kim, Kira Seeley, and Mary Pelzer. And Mary is here today. May have had to slip out to play the piano somewhere at noon. But she's a very busy cadet. And that was the group, I took that photo, I think, while I was marching near behind them. So it's a little bit blurry, but they are headed from the Lincoln Memorial down to the Women's Memorial that's right there at the gates of Arlington. And our cadets provided the color guard. Those, again, were the cadets in the color guard. 2 of 3 are with us today, as well as Captain Boyd. Captain Boyd, will you please stand? Okay, she's waiting. Captain Boyd was the cadre sponsor for that group. And here was a photo after the ceremony, and they are posing there with keynote speaker Admiral Christopher Grady, U.S. Navy, Vice Chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So they met some really high-powered individuals. In fact, I think it was even Phyllis Wilson, who made the new president of the Women's Memorial, who made the comment something like, I had been in the Army 20 years before I met the Secretary of Defense. I had never met one. I never saw one from a distance. I think I saw them on TV, but they had some amazing opportunities there. And at the end of the evening, they were flying out in the morning. They stopped by to give me this awesome framed photo, and it showed the number of female cadets in ROTC these days. And as I looked at that, thinking of what to say about the slides, one of the things that caught my mind was there are 9 cadets there. In perspective, when I was assigned to Fort Benning, Georgia in 1974, I think there were 9 female officers, 8 or 9 of us. And we literally could get together in someone's living room, you know, every few months just to have our own social events, just to be with other women. So, you know, for that many cadets to go to Washington with us all those years later from just one university and just part of that university was amazing. At this point, the cadets were, you know, off in the air on their way back to Illinois, and our granddaughter and Rick and I went to the last day's activities on Sunday. And I just love those shirts. They do a lot of paraphrasing with her, and that was, I believe, strong her, bold her, brave her, together. And even Rick was happy, my husband Rick was happy to have one of those shirts. Yeah. Okay, I caught myself mid-sentence there. The next 3 slides are at the General Vought Center dedication. They had a 4-minute video. And they, you know, put out to everyone in the country to send in a 30-second, you know, tape that could go in to be part of it. And we were featured, I think, 5 different times. I had 2 quick cameos, and then Cadet Pranada actually led off. She was the very first person in the video. And also Cadet Mary Pelzer, who was playing the piano at one point, depending on when you got here, and led the color guard on their way in. But the ladies were just really excited to do that, and you know, probably a good 30 seconds or more of that 4-minute video was us. So that was cool, and you can find that on YouTube, by the way. And that the last day also, my granddaughter and I, you know, got to spend a little bit more quality time with General Vought, and you can see there her the Presidential Medal of Freedom that she's wearing. And I've got on my U of I alumni hat, and she commented, "I like your hat." So that was kind of cool. And this is actually my Hall of Fame class, and they had, from 2014, and they had comments on it. Where's my pointer? Sam Skinner, and I believe the Chess Center is also working with Sam Skinner, and he's helped with ROTC with an endowment I started. Sam Skinner made the comment, "This is awesome." Now Sam, for those who may not know, and I didn't necessarily know before I met him, he's the Honorable Sam Skinner, former Secretary of Transportation, and he had been a Chief of Staff under George Bush. And then, whoops, back one. Mike Szymanski, Major General Mike Szymanski, made the comment, "We should all be proud of the leadership demonstrated by our Fighting Illini women in their part in developing a much stronger modern U.S. military than it was in the 70s. Okay, and one last photo since we're kind of on the Hall of Fame there. That was in the Armory lobby. My son Jonathan, he is the dad to Jordan, who was like 6 or 8 years old then. And then my son, of course, my husband, who you've met, and that's my son, Will. So I had to get in one slide with my family. Over the past 2 years, I spent countless hours working toward the opportunity to send these cadets to Washington, D.C. It's not often in life that so many things that I love and am passionate about come into place at the same time. I love the University of Illinois. I love the Army. I love ROTC, I love the Women's Memorial, I love my husband and my granddaughter. So that was just an awesome trip for all of us. A short bio on our own General Vought is appropriate. She joined the Air Force in 1957, accepting a commission as an officer. 10 years later, she deployed to Saigon during the Vietnam War. Standing on the shoulders of women who served before her, General Vought became, at the time of her retirement, one of the most decorated military women in U.S. history, with an illustrious Air Force career of 28 years. She tore down barriers so that new generations of women could serve their country with pride, honor, and selflessness. She received the Presidential Medal of Freedom in July 2022, cited as the first woman to hold every job she ever had. She's been inducted into the National Defense University Hall of Fame, Air Force Hall of Fame, and Hall of Fame of the National Women's Hall of Fame. Another U of I graduate, and I don't have a photo of it, that I learned about just within the last few weeks, another U of I graduate who served in World War II, actually went to my sorority, AO Pi. First Lieutenant Lorraine Zillner Rogers was a WASP, Women's Air Force Service Pilot, who ferried aircraft during World War II. There are others that I'd like to honor today. He's not here, but I still think it's important to thank Ron Ches for his vision and generosity in creating this awesome, safe place for veterans to gather, where they feel welcome and understood. When I was on campus from 1969 to 1973, the only place for vets to gather was in the Armory. I don't remember any Veterans Day ceremonies or events. ROTC had a very low profile outside the Armory due to student unrest on many campuses over the Vietnam War. A few of the Army cadets rented a ramshackle house near the Armory that they called the BOQ. A fire damaged most of the house and required hospitalization of at least one cadet. My sorority, Alpha Omicron Pi, invited the cadets to dinner at our house. Spearheading that event led to my being elected philanthropic chair. Congress didn't allow women in Army ROTC when I was on campus. Air Force was a year or two ahead of us. But a forward-thinking professor of military science, Colonel Charles Curran, who's over here on the right, and I believe there's actually a scholarship given in his name many years. Colonel Charles Curran allowed me to audit a few classes and go on a few field training exercises. I received my direct commission in the same ceremony of the men and was able to hit the ground running thanks to what I learned in ROTC. In fact, just this morning, it was interesting on Facebook. This is Tom Homer, he was the Cadet Brigade commander that year. We're Facebook friends, and he was in also my 2014 Hall of Fame class. He posted something, Happy Veterans Day, and about five remarks and this and that later. I mentioned, I'm giving the Veterans Day speech at Illinois, and he said, what time does it start? 11. So interesting to keep in touch with some of these friends. I was actually named the Army sponsor, and it's kind of interesting. I'm not sure where this idea came up, but it was before they called it Cadet Command, but whatever the ROTC, Army ROTC leadership was, they decided on having a female sponsor at these, ROTC battalions, none of which could have women in them at the time. But this was from the Fort Riley Advanced Camp newspaper. Now, I know you don't go to Fort Riley anymore. I think you go to Fort Knox for Advanced Camp, but it was Fort Riley back in the 70s. And again, as Army sponsor, that's me and my dad at Dad's Day weekend. And the irony was, it was an event at the Student Union. I don't even recall that the ROTC cadets themselves, like the cadet commander or anyone representing ROTC was there, but the sponsors were there. And that's me in the field. Didn't know about military attention to whatever poses, but I was holding a rifle, and I had on my beret with my Illinois patch on it. And that was my commissioning. And my mom and dad pinning on my rank. Interestingly enough, that photo showed up a few years ago when some friends of mine, as a COVID project, got their dad's old slides and found that, and that was the best picture I had of my commissioning.
Your styles haven't changed, honey. You still look the same.
It's a poor enough image, you can't see the wrinkles or whatever, but yeah, thank you. Flattery is everything. A few other quick college memories. I was in the 100 Club honorary. Every year a cadet or two is recognized for this honor. My advice, fasten your seatbelts. If you led an active life on campus, you'll continue leading an active life after graduation. I visited all 50 states, 50 countries, all 7 continents. We rarely miss a wedding, funeral, or family reunion. When we FaceTime with our son, Will, he just smiles and shakes his head when we say we need to slow down. I've mentioned that I was an AO Pi while on campus. I took my sorority enthusiasm into the Army. My boss's birthday was on the day of a brigade command post exercise. I baked cookies for a table in the CPX tent so they'd be available while receiving my military intelligence assessment. Any of you who have been to a CPX tent can probably envision there weren't many tables with cookies in there. The Leg Infantry Battalion commander tasted them with all the discernment of a judge on the Food Network. I decided critiquing my military talent was fair game, but not my baking or cooking abilities. I didn't bake or cook anything for the workplace again, only parties at our home. Thoughts on Veterans Day. Those of us who are vets are like a band of brothers and a few sisters. Most of us have many things in common, shared values like love of country, freedom, democracy, selfless service. But our actual service and experiences are very different. Wartime or peacetime, active, reserve, or guard, which service, branch, or MOS, officer or enlisted, gender, race, ethnicity, religion, and our family history. Last year, photographer Fred Zwicky asked me, how did an LAS major join the Army in 1973? One of my first thoughts was to make my dad proud. This is my dad, William Olson, and I listed him with the memorial in World War II memorial in Washington, D.C. There's a category called Civilian on the Home Front. My dad, William Olson, had 9 relatives who served in the War for Democracy. It wasn't called World War I until World War II happened. Dad had 10 relatives who served in World War II. Dad was medically disqualified. In the 1930s, he almost died from the late diagnosis of a ruptured appendix and a botched surgery. He watched his 3 brothers and 7 cousins go off to war, but with a BS degree in industrial arts education, he contributed to the war effort as an instructor at the Naval Air Technical Training Center in Chicago. He taught the sailors who were responsible for maintaining Navy ships and carriers. One of many courses he taught was for boiler operators. Uncle Ole, one of few officers in the family. He was a 90-day wonder who received his commission in 90 days. He served with the Army Air Corps in Europe. He likely had PTSD, but it wasn't labeled it that way then. Uncle George served in the Philippines. He wouldn't talk about his service. My cousins aren't interested in listing him with the World War II memorial. It's worth mentioning here that the World War II dead and missing are automatically registered by the National Archives. Registry of those lucky enough to make it home alive must be submitted by the veteran themselves, or in this case, since they're getting so old enough, by their families or friends. And you can do that at, it's an interesting, I think, website, www.iimemorial.com. www.iimemorial.com. I tried Googling it because I knew I could find my dad and my uncle there, and I had trouble getting to the right site, so it really helps to know the word there. The true stories of the next 3 family members are important to tell, but the Ches Mental Health First Aider encouraged me to share a trigger warning statement that it may be distressing for some of you that have combat experience. Uncle Mark, and he had no kids, so I submitted this one also. He was a World War II veteran. Uncle Mark had a gentle soul. He was assigned to the 100th Infantry Division as a rifleman. It hurt me to think of how hard that was for him. We got reacquainted the summer of 1990 when I was on staff at Fort Lewis, Washington for ROTC Advance Camp. Mark's face lit up when he talked about whispering the few words he knew in German to get 6 soldiers out of their foxholes and their 6 replacements, taking 12 prisoners without firing a single shot. Then he saddened and said, "But that wasn't what I got my medal for." He earned a Bronze Star. He fought in the Battle of the Bulge. When his unit pushed past their winter line, he was hit by a mortar fragment in the first 15 minutes and was sent by ambulance to a hospital in France where he spent 6 weeks. Before returning to his unit and special services, a few years after the war, he moved to Washington State. One day while I was visiting, he was driving past farm fields. He commented that he hated the smell of a certain crop growing. It brought back horrific World War II memories. That's not what I'm going to share with you today. That's not what I want you to leave remembering. But it's a reminder that some vets can't unsee, unhear, or unsmell. Dad's cousin, I need a quick drink of water at this point. Dad's cousin, Walter Kellett, a U.S. Army Air Corps corporal, served with the 17th Pursuit Squadron, 21st Pursuit Group in the Pacific. He was declared missing in action in about 1942. A telegram in June 1945, after the year ended, corrected his status as dead. The citation of honor includes the line, and about the middle, I know it's hard to read that, "His sacrifice will help to keep aglow the flaming torch that lights our lives, that millions yet unborn may know this priceless joy of liberty." The priceless joy of liberty. The family thought he died in Bataan. It turns out Corporal Kellett survived the 65-mile Bataan death march, but died in Cabanatuan POW camp. He was identified in 2019 using mitochondrial DNA compared to his sister and her son. His remains were returned for a memorial service and burial. I grew up next door to his parents. His dad, the fire chief in Ironwood, Michigan, for many years, gave me a ride to school occasionally. I phoned the current fire chief. Old portraits had been removed when the fire station moved to a new building, so the chief appreciated learning this history. When the hearse entered Michigan, it was escorted by many fire trucks. On the day of the memorial service, 2 ladder trucks displayed the U.S. flag between them outside the cemetery. Corporal Kellett returned home 79 years later to a hero's welcome. Even the local McDonald's had a sign thanking him for his service. And this is his sister Pat, who was 9 years old when her brother enlisted, and she lived to see him return. And his remains are buried between their parents. My dad was from one of those very large Swedish immigrant families, and there were 51 cousins, not spouses, not second cousins, whatever, 51 first cousins. At the time that Walter died, there were 2 of those cousins left. One was Walter's sister, and the other was this gentleman who, fortunately, being the AG officer that I am, I had his contact information, and I was able to find him and let him know, and he drove like 400 miles to get to the funeral, or to the memorial service. I just love this photo. Between my husband and I is an Air Force sergeant who was on leave in Ironwood, had no reason to think she needed a fancier uniform, but she felt that it was really important that she attend the memorial service in uniform. So she's wearing her Air Force PT uniform, but everyone was just so proud to have her there. Okay, I'll back up there for just 1 minute. Concerning Corporal Kellett's memorial service, the Fighting Illini cadet commander who had participated in the Bataan Memorial March at White Sands, New Mexico, wrote a message to be read at the memorial service. And I just thought that was awesome, that we kind of united our previous cadets with current cadets here with gentlemen who gave their life to be in that march, or soon afterwards. My husband's family also includes noteworthy veterans. Bart McNeil was on his 17th mission with the mighty 8th Air Force as the co-pilot of a B-17 bomber when the Luftwaffe shot them down. He became a prisoner of war of the Germans in Stalag Luft III, the POW camp featured in the movie The Great Escape. It was near the end of the war. Advancing Soviet armies from the east caused the German command to order a forced march inland in late January. It began in 12 below zero temperatures and snow. Many soldiers didn't have the appropriate clothes and boots. I remember Bart telling me that they sat to rest in a snowbank, and some didn't get up. I decided I wanted to live. So simple, but so profound. I could still remember the look on Bart's face when he shared his story. I decided I wanted to live. The suicide rate for veterans is still far too high. Wouldn't it be awesome if we could find a way to understand better that will to live? Okay, at this point it should be a little safer for some of the content that's in the audience. Not all veterans are combat veterans. My husband, Lieutenant Colonel Read, and I served from 1973 to 2003. The U.S. was not involved in as many military actions, and neither of us served overseas. But Army training involves risks. Rick's Rotary Wing Flight School class at Fort Rucker, Alabama had a helicopter crash that killed 2 students and their instructor. Another classmate died in a crash in Gander, Newfoundland, returning from Mideast peacekeeping. A few years after active duty, Rick missed flying and joined the Oklahoma National Guard. He had an engine emergency and landed a Huey in the foothills of the Ozark Mountains. That's the Huey that he landed. There was no loss of life and minimal damage to the helicopter. He earned a Broken Wing Award. The Army revised their emergency procedures based on his report. Rick had a roommate whose brother died in Ranger training. There was a time when we thought of the National Guard being activated primarily for weather emergencies. My freshman year, the Guard was called up on several campuses, including the University of Illinois, due to campus protests over the Vietnam War. More recently, we've seen National Guard troops being called up on January 6, 2021 to guard our nation's capital, and in several states over rioting and unrest. And yes, sometimes the Guard is called up for weather emergencies. My sister lives in Florida in the path of Hurricane Ian. She posted on Facebook 10 days after Ian hit. Still no power, phone service very sketchy, tree and house debris everywhere, and gasoline not the easiest to find. However, the U.S. military is providing meals, ice, water, and MREs, all near home, all done with a kind word and a smile. I can't say enough about these kind people. During Desert Storm, my husband and I were in the USAR Individual Ready Reserve. We weren't activated, but could have been if replacements were needed. Our sons were 6 and 9. I remember standing in their doorway watching them sleep and wondering how long I'd have that privilege. The evening news showed a woman Air Force pilot handing her infant to her mother. Our oldest son asked, "Where will we go if you both get called up?" I told him they would go to live with their Aunt Karen and uncle until we came home. Adding a little perspective on the service of women. When I was commissioned, our nation was transitioning from a very unpopular draft to an all-volunteer Army. This quote from the Center of Military History confirms what I always suspected. There will be great pressure from the Secretary of Defense and the Congress to use more women if we fail to attract enough men of reasonable quality to meet requirements. My words, they failed to attract enough men, and women volunteered. From the Revolutionary War to current times, 3 million women have served. Yet there are news commentators who never served a day in the military in their life who are disparaging women. A few decades ago, I was in a room with about 10 field grade officers. The most medals on any uniform were on the maternity uniform of an officer who commanded a company in Desert Storm. My own military history includes my husband of 47 years, Lieutenant Colonel retired Rick Read. We met at Fort Bliss, Texas, where I was attending the Air Defense Artillery Officer Basic, and he was a platoon leader with the 3rd Cav. We married at Fort Benning, Georgia, in the Infantry Center Chapel. How gung-ho is that? We were both officers, but I opted for a more traditional wedding attire. I actually had a roommate who was married in evening mess whites. She and her husband both wore the evening mess whites with the white jacket and the black, either skirt or trousers. And all of their bridesmaids and all of their groomsmen were wearing dress blues. I wasn't quite that gung-ho. On active duty with the 197th Infantry Brigade at Benning, at one point I was the brigade assistant S1 and Rick was the armor battalion S1. We exchanged many ideas at home. A few more photos of my active duty years. That's when I was promoted to first lieutenant. Those uniforms were around a long time. And Rick missed the promotion because he was in flight school at Fort Rucker. We went a year and a half that included our entire engagement, the first 8 months of our marriage that we didn't live together. We had it backwards for the 70s. And this was my promotion to captain when I was teaching at the infantry school. I don't know if they still do it or not, but that they referred to, it's got the infantry follow me signal, and it goes from, well, for a woman it goes under your name tag. The men had a pocket there with a button on it that they hung it from. But anyway, they referred to it as the pull to talk switch. So, you know, kind of like, like a kid's toy, you know, you pull it and they talk. So anyway, that's when I was teaching at the infantry school. First woman officer assigned at the, to teach at the infantry school. That was exciting, to say the least. When my husband, when the group of advanced course captains came through, many of them knew my husband. Now you couldn't even see me. I was backstage doing view graphs, and I got a standing ovation for showing view graphs. Okay. And here's, okay. As reservists, we both served as military academy liaison officers for West Point. When he moved on and I was assigned to his territory, I used his calling cards on my first visit, as the contact info was the same. I capitalized on his good reputation. Being a mom in the Army was interesting. One of my sons was at that age when boys brag to their friends, "My dad can beat up your dad." I overheard my son John say, "My mom can beat up your dad." Actually, women in my era didn't get any type of self-defense training, but I rarely admitted that. A few years ago, my son told a friend, "My mom was in military intelligence. I couldn't get away with anything." As military academy liaison officers, we would often get calls at home from highly motivated, respectful candidates interested in ROTC scholarships or USMA. They would ask to speak to Major Read, and our sons would enjoy asking, "Which Major Read, my mom or my dad?" Here's a few photos of my reserve duty years and active guard reserve years. That was my promotion to major. This is actually my mother. My dad sadly only lived to see me make captain. My mother was at my promotion ceremonies to major. And that was held at the military ball for the University of Detroit cadets. At that time, I was just kind of attached to them for retirement points or something. But again, they were looking for female role models, and they did have a few women cadets in the program, and so I served that role of helping to mentor some of them. And later, I went on a 3-year active guard reserve tour with ROTC, teaching at the University of Detroit. This was at the summer camp at Fort Lewis, Washington, advanced camp at Fort Lewis. About 2 decades ago, the Army came up with the slogan, oh, and I'm sorry, this was my retirement. Kind of cool. I worked for about 4 or 5 summers at West Point on an invitational academic workshop. I think now they call it a summer seminar, but they brought in 400 high school students from around the country, and I was one of the adult mentors. And so when I retired from the Army, I was presented that awesome saber. And actually, the guy who put it together, who ordered it, had been at Fort Benning when I was there, so at the bottom there, and you can't see it, it says, "Follow me." That's the infantry motto. And what was kind of cool was just a few weeks before that, President George Bush had been at West Point to actually award the commissions, and he got the same kind of saber. So I thought, wow, that's pretty cool when you get the same saber that a president gets. About 2 decades ago, the Army came up with the slogan, "U.S. Army Retired, Soldier for Life." It's on a lapel pin and the badge on our uniforms. Here we go. This is the Soldier for Life badge. ROTC has a similar slogan, "Leaders for Life." We met a Purdue female grad through our son Will's fencing club that had a master's degree in entomology. She received a direct commission in January of 2007 as a first lieutenant in the Medical Service Corps as a medical entomologist. Apparently there were enough bugs in Iraq that the Army realized that they needed people who understood bugs. Initially, I mentored her through basics like hairstyles and uniform requirements. When she deployed to Iraq in December 2008, my husband and I both checked our emails every morning to help answer whatever questions she had. She called my husband, Lieutenant Colonel Rick, and me, Colonel Mom. We're still Facebook friends. In fact, in the course of confirming that, yes, that was her branch and that was what her specialty was, We had a few text messages back and forth, and she said, "I miss calling you Colonel Mom. Would it be okay if I still called you that?" And I thought, gosh, that really was helpful advice that I found the time to give. Another Soldier for Life experience happened in November 2021. We were flying from Indianapolis to Denver, and our flight was delayed for several hours. There was a family group of about 9 Afghan refugees from Camp Atterbury that were relocating. We realized how much they had helped American troops, and we were anxious to help them. Some spoke better English than others. I started with photos, and after showing them pics of us in uniform, they shared pics of the men in uniform. There were 2 United Nations representatives who were reluctant to let them board the flight for fear that they wouldn't arrive in time for their connection, and the UN didn't want them stranded alone in an airport. My husband exchanged phone numbers and promised that we would help to get them to their gate. He phoned to confirm that we did. 2 of the ladies asked if they could have a picture taken with us. And we just thoroughly enjoyed meeting them. In fact, when they were walking down the jetway to their plane, I gave them both a hug. And it was kind of like when you say goodbye to family. They'd walk a few feet and they'd turn around and look back to see if I was still there, and I'd wave, and they'd walk another few feet, look back, and I'd still wave. And that was a very positive experience. Other Veterans Day thoughts. And I apologize to Captain Castile here. I've got a lot more Air Force stories than Navy stories, but my dad did teach at a Navy school. I've taken Air Force space available flights from Grissom Air Reserve Base in Peru, Indiana, to Virginia, California, and Alaska on board KC-135 refuelers. I've always been the ranking passenger, and pilots have invited me to sit in a jump seat in the cockpit with headphones. As they were handed off from one air traffic controller to another, the controller would say, "Thank you for your service." The Air Force pilot would respond, "Proud to serve." Hearing that exchange made me proud to be an American. When people thank me for my service, I often reply, "Proud to serve." Some of my favorite Veterans Day thank yous have come from my own family. One Veterans Day, my son John posted on Facebook, "Thanks to Rick Read and Debbie Olson Read for serving this country for a combined 54 years. When our granddaughter Jordan was 6 years old, she was excited to phone Grandma and Grandpa to say thank you for your service. Life doesn't get much better than that. To veterans in the audience today, thank you for your service. And to those attending who came to show their support to veterans, thank you for caring. Hopefully you've all found something meaningful today. May God bless America and our great nation's veterans.
Colonel Read, thank you. Thank you for your service. Thank you for sharing your story. It's very inspirational, your history. Thank you for your continued leadership and advocacy for our women veterans and to get the recognition that they so readily deserve. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our ceremony. Again, on behalf of the staff and students at the Chess Veterans Center, thank you for your service, thank you for your support, and I look forward to our continued partnership to help our veterans' lives be even better than they are. Please join us for some light refreshments, some photo opportunities with the Colonel, and have a wonderful day. Thank you.